Hey friends! So I thought I'd get all dressed up to talk about today's topic, the up-and-coming Willy Wonka movie starring the one and only Timothée Chalamet as Mr. Willy Wonka. Now, I've heard a lot of talk online saying that this movie is gonna totally flop, and not only does that hurt my heart, but I also don't agree with it. I honestly think that the up-and-coming Willy Wonka movie is going to be one of the greatest movies of all time. Now, I know you may be looking at me going, okay, this dude's obviously a crazed Wonka fan dressing up as him for a video, and yes, you would be right, but I do have some valid reasons for why this movie is going to be actually great and why I think it's not going to flop, but actually really stand the test of time and be a great, fun family movie that we're going to enjoy for years to come. It all kind of started when I first saw Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory in 1971, and this film really kicked off the Roald Dahl movie adaptations. It starred Gene Wilder as Willy Wonka, and it was just a super fun musical. They changed a few things from the book to the movie to make it more accessible, but for the most part, it was super entertaining. People didn't think it was like a groundbreaking success in any way, but it wasn't until the 1980s when it started being played on TV year after year, and when it got released on home video, people started buying the VHS, and from then on, it started to develop a bit of a cult following. So because of the success of that Willy Wonka movie in the 1980s, movie studios started greenlighting a whole bunch more Roald Dahl book to movie adaptations. And there was definitely one film during the 2000s that really took off. Tim Burton's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory in 2005, starring Johnny Depp as Mr. Willy Wonka. This film smashed it. It made $450 million off a $150 million budget. So it makes sense why now Warner Brothers want to try cash in on that Wonka success once again. But the Tim Burton version was kind of polarizing. People found Johnny Depp's performance to be kind of weird. Willy Wonka was less like eccentric and fun and more just kind of creepy. On top of that, they added a weird backstory with Willy Wonka's father being a dentist and him trying to reunite with his dad after so many years, and it was just an odd choice, I would say. It wasn't in the book at all. But even the 1971 film, they had to make a lot of changes with that one. Obviously, visual effects weren't what they are today. They couldn't do the whole squirrel scene. They had to change that into golden geese. Roald Dahl wasn't even the biggest fan of it. He had originally written the screenplay for the film, but the studio had made so many changes to it that by the end of it, he was really kind of hating it. He didn't like that they made Willy Wonka kind of the main character of the movie over Charlie. He called it saccharine, sappy, and sentimental, which is like part of the reason why maybe I like it. But for him, he wasn't a big fan. But I do believe that people now kind of find the 1971 version the one that holds up, and that's the one we keep going back to. And I think purely because of Gene Wilder's performance as Willy Wonka, it is the iconic version. I mean, he's the one I'm dressed up as today over the Johnny Depp version. So we definitely look back on that one with a lot more fondness. So has there been a real faithful adaptation of Roald Dahl's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? I mean, that's up to speculation, but instead of getting an adaptation this time, we're getting a completely new story, and this is a prequel to these Willy Wonka films, and this is the one talking about how Willy Wonka came to be the successful chocolatier that he is today. So far, the plot has been kept completely under wraps, so we have no idea what the movie is going to be about just yet, but it means the writers are at liberty to kind of make up their own story. I actually believe that this year's Wonka is going to be really great, and the reason for that is because there is a really awesome team working not only behind the camera, but also in front of the camera. So the director of Wonka is a guy called Paul King, and he's famous for directing the last two Paddington movies, which you may have heard about. Paddington 2, it recently got the honor of being the highest reviewed movie on Rotten Tomatoes. It managed to get 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, and judging from those critics' reviews, was called the greatest movie of all time. That lasted about a month when some British reviewer decided it's not that great and gave it a negative review. It dropped down to 99% on Rotten Tomatoes and was, after 1 month, not the greatest movie of all time anymore on there. But the important part of the story here is that a lot of critics loved Paddington 2. It was a very joyous, fun, colorful, whimsical watch. And I definitely recommend you see it because Yes, it's a kids movie, but it's honestly one of the best kids movies of all time. And it just goes to show that kids movies can be really fun and also really great. So definitely check it out. There's even a joke made in the recent Nicolas Cage and Pedro Pascal movie, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, where they talk about just how great Paddington 2 is. So it's starting to hit the zeitgeist a little bit that Paddington 2 is a wonderful kids movie. And because Paul King directed that, I'm really starting to wonder that maybe he's going to bring that same energy, passion, color, and whimsy into this Wonka film. Also, this cast is full of British legends. I'm talking Olivia Colman, recent Academy Award winner. She really only picks interesting films and movies that get to show her chops off. So it's a good sign that she's a part of this. Same thing can be said of Sally Hawkins. She was recently seen in The Shape of Water, another fantasy film. Mr. Bean himself, Rowan Atkinson, a comedy legend, is in this movie. Another comedy legend, Keegan-Michael Key from America, he's in this film. I don't know what roles these people are playing, but just the fact their names are attached is super exciting to me. And of course, the biggest draw card, Timothée Chalamet playing Mr. Willy Wonka. Now, of course, he is so hot right now. Everyone's talking about him. Everyone's in love with him. He's got a legion of fans on the internet and they don't shut up about him either. It's going to be interesting to see if that obsession with Timothée Chalamet online also translates to people going to the cinema to see his movies. June, that he was the star in, was obviously a major success, but that was a massive tentpole movie, and I don't know if there's enough love for him to draw big crowds to the cinema. We're just gonna have to see come December if he's someone that can really draw audiences to the cinema. Because this film is probably gonna be very colorful, very fantastical, there might be a lot of elaborate sets and really cool set design, and the production designer for this movie is Nathan Crowley, and he's worked with a lot of Christopher Nolan films. He did The Dark Knight, Interstellar, The Prestige, Westworld, and he's also signed on to do the new Wicked movie musicals that are coming out. We've also got the costume designer Lindy Hemming. She's worked on Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, The Dark Knight as well. She did the recent Wonder Woman movies, and she's worked on a whole bunch of James Bond films. So she's also a real A-list costume designer. So having her on set, I think, would be absolutely beneficial. And we have seen a few photos already of Timothée Chalamet in costume, and they are harkening back to the old Willy Wonka movie and also the illustrations from in the book. And also the cinematographer is Seamus McGarvey. He's worked on Atonement, Anna Karenina. He did the Avengers movie and The Greatest Showman. The thing that all these people have in common is that they've worked on huge, big budget movies. And on top of that, they've shown that they're really good at being creative and being imaginative. And I think that's really only going to work in Wonka's favor this year. The other thing whispering in my ear that maybe this Wonka movie is better than people think it's going to be is that they've moved the release date to the end of the year. It was originally slated for March this year, but all of a sudden Warner Brothers decided to push back to December in 2023. A lot of people say that delays like this in a movie are never a good sign. I think that COVID may have impacted the production a little bit, which is why it might be pushed back. But moving a movie to a December date is nothing but a good sign, in my opinion. A lot of the movies that studios put out in the early parts of the year, I don't think they're necessarily looking for hits. A lot of those films they're just kind of putting out to gauge like what audiences think about it, or they don't have much faith in the movie, so they're like, let's just put it out there after everyone's kind of calmed down. Not many people are thinking about going to the movies at the start of the year, so it's not the best place for a movie to be released. But the fact they've pushed it down to December, that is Christmas period. People are on holidays, they've got a little bit more money to spend, they want to spend time with family, going to the movies. It also shows that this movie might be quite magical and even have like Christmas themes inside of it. And the biggest signal that I can see is that in December, this is when they start releasing a lot of big Oscar movies. So movies that they think could be campaigned to win a whole bunch of Oscars. I feel like having an original March release date, maybe the studio looked at it and went, oh, this movie's better than we expected it to be. It could be a real contender come Oscar season. I mean, it's got a lot of set design, costume design, and technical and artistic influence to it that could really do well at the Oscars. It could perhaps even win some of those technical categories. You've got Timothée Chalamet, who is a past nominee. Maybe he's doing an outstanding performance as Wonka and could be getting into the conversation for Best Actor. The fact they're moving it to December shows me that they're very serious about this movie and the possibility that it could do really well, not just with audiences and critics, but also awards voters too. The one thing that worries me though is that I've heard Wonka is going to be a musical. At first I was like, that's a weird choice, but having thought about it, the original 1971 Wonka movie was a musical, so it kind of makes sense if they want to hark back to that and do something very similar. I remember The Candyman was a huge hit from that movie. Pure Imagination, sung by Gene Wilder, is just a classic now. So maybe they're kind of going for that same vibe with this. According to IMDb, the songs are being written by Neil Hannon from the Divine Comedy. It's like Irish baroque pop, chamber pop group. They had a whole bunch of hits in the 90s. It's very whimsical and cinematic, as well as slightly retro, like it's got this kind of 70s and 80s vibes. And on top of that, a nice tinge of British humor in there. I think it's really gonna lean into that pure imagination and Candyman aesthetic that's going on, rather than trying to do something like Broadway and really show-offy. But the question we're all asking is like, can any of the cast actually sing? And you know, I decided to do some research to see if they can. So Timothée Chalamet actually did a little song in A Rainy Day in New York. He has a kind of weaker, softer voice. It's very chill. He's definitely hitting the notes, but there's not much range to it. I feel like it'll be more La La Land than West Side Story, where they've hired these actors that don't necessarily sing, but can still hold a tune. I mean, we definitely know that Timothée Chalamet can rap.
Look at me, it's Timothee, about to hit him with the ZTST.
On top of that, Olivia Colman actually did a cover of a Portishead song for BBC's Children in Need. And while there's definitely a lot of auto-tune slapped onto that song, she does have a kind of like charismatic, really wacky jazz voice, which I think will actually kind of work for the concept of Wonka. I feel like with the help of auto-tune, she could really pull off like a big jazzy number. Similar thing could be said for Keegan-Michael Key. I saw a video of him singing on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, and he has a very like smooth, gravelly voice. It could work really well for kind of like maybe a villainous character. So maybe that's the kind of character he's playing in this. I don't know, but he can hold a tune. His voice is actually really nice. So that's a good sign for this. And finally, Rowan Atkinson, definitely not a singer, but he did play Zazu in the 1994 animated film The Lion King, the legendary Lion King. And in that, he's very much just talk singing as well. Like he doesn't necessarily sing, but he gives the character so much vocal flair that I think he's probably going to do the same thing here in Wonka. I don't know if all these people are actually singing in the movie. It may just be one or two characters, but it's a good sign that while they've not actually put songs out or been in musicals before, there is proof on the internet that they can hold a tune or can add a lot of flair to the song through crazy vocals or changing up a character's voice in some way. There's a lot of potential there for this movie to be an absolute smash. If we can see Paddington 2 replicated in the form of a Wonka, I think this movie is going to be wonderful. Warner Brothers, who's producing the movie, have really put their all into this. They've given it a budget of $125 million, which is a lot of money. It's around the same as what Tim Burton's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was given. Plus, there's a lot of big A-list cast and crew working on the film. They're giving it their all to make sure that Wonka hits. And not only will it be a hit with audiences, the chance that maybe it could get into the Oscars conversation too will only propel the want for people to see this. If it starts winning awards left, right, and center, and maybe even getting into Best Picture, if it's that good and the marketing campaign is good enough, then it really could last the test of time. And people might love this movie enough that it becomes a family favorite, and maybe we'll put it on every Christmas or something like that. I don't know, I'm getting very excited because obviously I am a fan, not just of Wonka and Roald Dahl, but also the cast and the crew of this movie. And I just want to have total faith that it's going to do really well and not flop. I want it for everyone involved. I want this to be just an absolute smash so that we get maybe even more Wonka content in the future. And on that note, Netflix has recently acquired the Roald Dahl company, meaning that they now have free reign on all Roald Dahl books and stories. We recently saw Netflix do a movie adaptation of Matilda the Musical, which was generally pretty well received. They've also got a Taika Waititi animated series based on Wonka. No idea what that's about, but that's definitely coming. So even that might help tie into this Wonka movie in some way and continue to push advertising for the film. And as far as I'm aware, there's a lot more Netflix Roald Dahl content coming. But to finish off, I really feel like people are underestimating just how good this Wonka movie is going to be. Yes, it may not do well at the box office, but I am hoping that it's a full smash, and I would love to see it around awards season, maybe getting some Oscars. This is me just saying this before I've seen the film. I may have too high expectations and go in there completely hating it, but judging from Paddington 2, which I think is one of the best kids movies of all time, I really have high faith that Wonka is going to be something similar. Only time will tell come December what actually happens and what this movie is actually like. So I will be waiting with bated breath for that day. So yeah, what do you think? Do you think it's going to be a runaway success, or do you think it's going to completely flop? Have I convinced you that this may be the greatest movie of all time? Do let me know in the comments, and also let me know what other Roald Dahl content you'd love to see get created. Feel free to give me a like and also subscribe. I do a whole bunch of videos about movies and music and TV and also awards season. So if you love any of those things, definitely check more of my stuff out. I hope you have a wonderful week. It's your friend Phil. I'll see you next time.